And now for our program. Our moderator this evening is Virgil Flood from the class of 1980. Virgil has been an active volunteer and supporter of Davidson for many, many years now. He knows just how far the college has come since his days as a student. I'm now honored to turn this program over to Virgil, who will introduce the rest of the panel.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Judith, for getting us started this evening. We're delighted to have all of you on the call, and we'll try to get to as many questions of yours as possible. So again, please put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to them a little bit later. Again, my name is Virgil Flood. I'm from the class of 1980. Some people have said that's the best class ever. I had the honor of chairing the Special Committee on Commemoration, which is an effort to honor the work of the people who helped to build Davidson's campus as we know it today. We will mark this contribution or these contributions with a commemoration at a site near Oak and Elm Rows on the oldest part of our campus. I'm excited about tonight's discussion and ask you to welcome three incredible members of the Commemoration Committee. I'm going to start with Hillary Green, the James B. Duke Professor of Africana Studies. We also have Centra Pollock from the class of 1999. Centra is an investment manager and a trustee at Davidson. And then last but not least, we have Leah Newman, who is the director and curator of the Davidson Art Galleries. If you will allow me, I'll give you a brief overview of the committee's work, and then we'll have some time for questions for each of these panelists. As some of you may know, the Special Committee on Commemoration was created by the Board of Trustees in 2019 to recommend a visible and appropriate way to honor the work of enslaved people and others whose labor was exploited at Davidson. And we began our work with three core values. The first of which, if you would advance the slide, is Davidson College is committed to acknowledging its institutional history honestly and fully. The Davidson College is also committed to acknowledging the range of ways in which individuals have added to its history, and do that honestly and fully. And that Davidson is committed to building a genuinely inclusive campus in the present and in the future. Next slide. We also developed a list of key characteristics that we wanted to convey with this project. And you can see a list of them here. They were very important to the committee as we made our site selection, as we thought about the proposed commemorative sites. There are a few things that we wanted to focus on early as well. First of all, we took our time and we conducted research early by looking at a number of memorials in the US and beyond, including the Vietnam War Memorial, the Holocaust Museum, the University of Virginia's site, and the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. We got a lot of great insight from Costella Connor, a former Davidson Office of Administration and Financial Aid employee who is a native of Davidson. She has served on the town's planning commission and is a trustee of Reeves Temple AME Zion. We got some important matters settled early. The site selection process was crucial. We looked at 5 locations before choosing the historic quad, which is framed by the Cunningham Theater Building, Oak and Elm Rows, Phi and U-Halls, and Davidson College Presbyterian Church. Third, we had broad support from students, from faculty, from staff, from alumni of color, and from the community members. And then finally, our community process was fair and open. Everyone's voice was heard. No one person was given priority or any preferential treatment. Everyone had a say, and everyone contributed mightily to the whole process. We eventually decided on 5 finalists from a field of over 60 respondents to our initial ask. And as you saw earlier, we added 4 more people to our committee to help make the selection final. Nathaniel Baganza from the class of 2024, who was a student at the time, Bernetta Graham from the town of Davidson, Clint Smith, an alum who was from the class of 2010, and then Tyler Wilson from 2014, who was representing the Art Collection Advisory Committee. Each of the finalists, Radcliffe Bailey, Bethany Collins and Taquasi Dyson, Hood Design Group, Studio Zodi, and Hank Willis Thomas and Perkins and Will, all subsequently came to campus for site visits. It wasn't easy, but the committee came to a unanimous decision on the winner. And I'm delighted to say that with these hands, sculpted by Hank Willis Thomas, will be installed on October 23rd, 2025. And I sincerely hope that many of you will join us for their festivities and the unveiling of the commemorative site at that time. So we know you've got a lot of questions, but I'm going to start with a few for the panelists. And this is for all of us. What was important to you in determining the final site? So let's start with Centra.
I wanted the site to be somewhere that was visible by both the town and the campus, something that would be very, very present, not tucked off in some corner that only a few people who went over there would know about. I was also really surprised. So I don't know who was on this call, but as a student who graduated in '99, the most beautiful, most serene, most historic part of campus to me that I really enjoyed walking through because I'd walk to the post office was not a place where students were passing through very often because there was really nothing there for them if they weren't going to Cunningham, or there's not a lot that was going on in Phi and U on a daily basis, although there's going to be, we're going to learn a little bit more about things that are going to happen in the area besides the site. But it completely reinvigorates a part of campus that I think is very special, has a lot of, clearly it's got a lot of history, and it has a certain gravitas to it. I don't know how other people felt about it, but I just, when we selected that site, I knew it was the right one.
Hillary?
I'll follow up. I'll follow up with that. The location. It's not hidden. We're not hiding this history. And the first time I walked by this campus as when the college was dealing with its history and having that opening conference, I felt the weightness of it. This place felt sacred. It felt holy, and you could feel the hands that had built this land. And to honor those who are working there, but it's also hyper visible. For those coming up to the street for the community, we're not tucking it away. For those coming in who don't know, it's an invitation to learn. And for us on our campus, it's activating a space that is not quite activated right now. People don't go over there. There's no pathways over there. And for me, the site is especially special for its history and what it can do for future conversations.
Leah, what was important to you?
And I would agree with all of that. We talked a lot at the site about that there was a time when Black people were barred from our campus. And I think there's a feeling of that in the community that has lingered. And so this idea that the memorial will be visible from Main Street, I hope will be sort of a welcome. I think that it wasn't part of the choosing the location, but a really important thing that came out later is we realized that the site will be one of the first places on admissions tours. And that feels huge, that it will really demonstrate to prospective students what the college values. And I think it will attract the kind of students that we want. So that felt really important, although it wasn't part of the original determination for the site.
Yeah. For me, I wanted it to be a place of, and I think Hillary might have referenced this before, a place of reverence, a place that is contemplative, a place that was historic. I think Centra mentioned it as well. It's a place where it was sacred. Not only was it something that was visible, but this was a place where Davidson kind of first began as an institution, and I thought that it meant something significant to have the commemoration site at a place on campus where the campus actually began. So to Hillary, how was the historical research done to ensure accuracy and fair representation?
And this is one of the things I loved about this project. It was thoughtful. It involved people like me as a historian of African American experience, U.S. history, 19th century in particular. It involved the archives. It involved our material culture. We're still learning about this history. Literally last week, my students were out there doing site shovel tests, and we found more material culture, including a brick that was buried in that area. And one for things for me, why this site is so special, African Americans in our early history were referenced as hands, servants, never named. But the buildings of Oak Row, Phi, and U have the fingerprints of the enslaved brick makers. They were built by enslaved people. So we have the voices and the materiality surrounding the site. While we don't know their names yet, we do know who worked here and the long history, and having the hands part and the ongoing research part recognized, but the humanity, the dignity, and their physical labor that has built our institution, including the building surrounding it, that we can see that material culture was so important in terms of fairly represented the hands, the servants, those in the background
Say a
who
little bit more.
made such contributions.
Say a little bit more about that, Hillary. Why do you think the design reflects that legacy of humanity, particularly of enslaved individuals?
And I think it's how we called individuals. They were hands.
Mm.
They literally worked. And I think about the women in the laundry who literally used their hands to care for people, those who served food, those who did the grounds and what they did and the ordinariness of it. But these are working hands. These are hands that have seen labor and time and age and wear. And there's something so simplistic because it's not tied to one person. It represents a collective. And that part of that collective, we can tell a longer history of the men and women, but then their children, their grandchildren, their nieces, their nephews who continue to work here, and we give a continuity in what they did best. They used their talents through their hands itself, rather than their intellectual labor that we think about the professors and everything else. It was their hands. And it's in their hands of caring, their hands of care, their hands of building is why Davidson's still here. And if we have our legacy and our missions to recognize the human dignity and worth of every person, we are finally acknowledging the hands that literally built our campus.
Interesting points.
Mhm.
Centra, how can this site engage younger generations and foster more meaningful conversations about history?
Well, I think that if this is one of the first things you see, either when you arrive on Davidson campus as a student or when you're taking a tour, or if you're just coming from town and you are aware of this weighty history and you see something that is this large a statement on the campus, I think it's a very welcoming sort of feeling to have the hands they're reaching out to, and you if you see the scale of the person in the picture, you can be encapsulated by these hands. I think that people coming to campus can contextualize themselves in this either. I mean, whoever they are, whatever their identity is and whatever their past and future is, it can be sort of contained and begun here. And they can think about where they fit into that picture. And in learning about the past, in thinking about the history, and in understanding how you relate to that, I think that that gives students at Davidson and the people that are building the future an opportunity to imagine a world that is actually better than the one that these hands were living in and where these hands labored, but that nothing comes from nothing. They are part of a context, they are part of a history, and now they're sort of also released into the world to go and do something about it. And I feel like you can imagine yourself in this piece of art in a way that you can't. If we gave every student coming to Davidson a lecture about the history of the college and an understanding, that's important, but they can't see themselves in it and they can't see themselves in the future. And I think that this particular installation offers their imagination some room for growth and expansion.
Question for Leah. Were the descendants, actually for Leah and Hillary, but Leah first, were the descendants of enslaved laborers or other impacted communities involved in any way in the shaping of the vision for the site?
Yeah, so while this was not co-design, we had put out a request for qualifications from architects and artists. We did engage community members in that sort of early preliminary work. One way we did that was through Zoom sessions, and that was really for the teams. It was before they started creating their proposals. We wanted them to be able to engage with faculty, staff, the community, descendants, whoever could join and wanted to join. And it was really about information gathering. And that, I think, helped the teams develop specific proposals for Davidson. When we selected the artists initially and the architects, we were just basing it off previous work, but then we needed to see something that was very specific to our history. I would also say that the community voice on the jury, and I think you all would probably agree with me, really helped push the project in a direction that was more figurative, that was a little less conceptual. There was this conversation that really kind of pushed things where we talked about, and I think Hillary started to mention it, this idea of this really simple point that we could start with, that Black people built our campus, they shaped the bricks, they labored here. That labor wasn't recognized. Sometimes they worked in labs, in chemistry labs and things like that. It also was about this gesture of care. It pushed us toward a figurative kind of project, I think, a little bit more, just some really smart questions that community members asked during all of these sessions. And then I would say that another way that the community was involved, Hank Willis Thomas and Perkins and Will, they always pushed for community engagement sessions. And we had a few in person. We had some that were by Zoom. And I remember this conversation where the team shared with the community their idea for the patina of the piece. And their original idea was to use a really dark patina, kind of a deep, if you know the Rodin at the Visual Arts Center, if you know our Rodin, you know that patina. It's like a dark black. It almost has like a blue to it. It is so dark. And the community really pushed back on it. It was not popular with the community. And you'll see in some of the later images that the team totally responded to that comment, and they have totally switched gears on what the patina looks like, and the patina and all of the site materials, stone that we're using, the material that the benches are made out of, that has all been shared with the community at some recent sessions as well.
Yeah, I'll add the community was involved from the entire process, including input on having a community member on the team and to think about what are we doing. And also too in the artists and even the RFP and adding people in, their voices were heard. They had the various teams had to meet with community members. But the best conversation was over the patina color. If the community had any point was on this. The final color is reflects of what they wanted more so than what the original vision was. And the artists and the rest of us had to hear them. That dark color did not represent them, and they were clear on that, and they spoke as one. So what does that mean that we were able to adjust? It wasn't co-design, but on this part, we listened. And that I think is important. And the other thing is too, a question about whether or not these are too masculine of hands versus feminine hands. And community members like, that looks like my grandma's hands. Having that in there too represents these hands, and people like, no, we don't have these problems. This is representative of a whole host of people through this very simple figurative design. And I think that part in hearing community and seeing it is actually important because we don't, as a community, don't always listen to our community neighbors and partners. And that healing process started now. And I'm thinking about what does it mean going forward? Because we heard them on this part and community was involved in various parts throughout this process. So I'm looking forward to what does this look like going forward, but they were involved from the beginning.
I will say I was not in on the conversation about the patina, but I think the final result is warm and beautiful, and I really look forward to seeing it in place on the whole sculpture, not just the tip of a thumb.
You know, it's a couple of things. By the way, for the audience that are listening in and watching us this evening, please, if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them in a little bit. But two things kind of stuck out for me about the community's input, and that was very early on, we heard from community members who said that they didn't want this to be any one particular person's face. They didn't want it to be a specific individual. And to a very large extent, this is very figurative. It could be a man, a woman. It's just hands. It is purposely designed to not be any one individual, but to be a representation of people who may have made the bricks, people who have maybe even made the beds for students, or made the meals. The second thing that I recall was that this needed not to be just about slavery, or that it needed to reflect both the past and the present as well as the future. And I think this, again, is a figurative depiction of hands that could have been the bricklayers, it could have been the brick makers, it could have been the laundry people, it could have been the grounds folks, the groundskeepers, it could have been anyone who worked on campus. And I think that's part of why, as we did the early work, this one stood out so well because it captured all of those elements of what we wanted in the space, for it to be close to the community, for it to be visible, but also for it to be figurative and for it to be past, present, and future. So along those lines, a question for you, Leo, on this one. How can this site contribute to the healing and dialogue within the broader Davidson community?
Well, I think that sometimes public art can be contentious, that art can be contentious. So I hope that that's not where we're headed, but I also know that art can really be about healing. And I think part of it is just creating space to acknowledge those who were enslaved, those who were exploited, those who are not acknowledged. I think it's about recognizing that we cannot change the past, but I do know that art can help facilitate some difficult conversations. I feel it and see it all the time in the galleries on campus. Um, I know that our public works on campus are helping other folks feel like they belong. We talk about it all the time, the role that art can play in helping you belong. Um, I think a really big part of this, though, will be how the site is used, what the offer to the community is, the openness of the space. If the community embraces it, then it becomes a shared space. It becomes not a Davidson College space, but really a space for all of us and for us to, imagine kind of the future we want. So that's how I'm hoping that people view the site and use the site.
I mean,
Yeah,
I,
there's a, go
I,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm even imagining, beyond the history lesson, beyond the welcome to campus, beyond the contextualization, beyond the healing, I'm imagining this as a beautiful site that, um, students might go to late at night to have a conversation with a friend, or having moments, those kinds of Davidson moments where you are engaged in a conversation that really matters to you. This is the kind of part of the campus that's quiet and serene and where meaningful conversations could possibly emerge. And so I'm hoping that this is actually some people's favorite spot on campus, even if it is difficult in some of the message it conveys, that it I don't know, that it ingratiates itself into the hearts of people as their favorite spot, or at least a memorable spot, or somewhere where they have a distinctive Davidson moment that they take with them into the world.
And I would add to that, I really see it as a meditative spot because standing in these hands, and they might look massive, but when you're in it, it feels like a hug.
Mhm.
It feels like you're being hugged by the hands and that space where you're not alone. And that I think it also brings in belonging and this long history from the past and connecting to the present and the future. And it's intimate, even with its size, but also allows you to approach it on your terms in various ways to engage. So I'm looking for the meditative space in there, but also as a classroom space. And I see this as going to be a unique space that is not currently present right now and activate it in a way that I can't imagine what's going to happen. But I know this is going to invite conversation, and those conversations is what, and unique experiences is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Just
Uh,
add really quick too
Mhm.
that we had these conversations with Hank and with the architects about how people engage with the site, and there was some concern that people are going to climb on it and they're going to want to take a selfie and they'll be smiling. And the artist really embraced that. I think it helped him think about, or he was thinking about the future in that, right? That it is a difficult past and it recognizes that. And it's not trying to gloss over it, but it also is a place where we can gather and really kind of think about the future. So I think that will, I think you're right, Citra and Hillary, that people will gather and hopefully they have that sort of like moment where they do think about the history, um, and that sort of like academic moment, but they also have an emotional, empathetic one, right?
there are several questions from the audience, and I'm going to take one, but I'll get back to the questions for the panel that we predetermined in a minute. But this one I thought was important to ask at this point in the conversation. It is from a viewer who asked, do the fingers have fingerprints? And if so, are they based on a real person or persons? Leah, you want to take that?
For that. Yeah, I think we talked a little bit. I think Hillary hit on it a little bit. So the idea for this really was, you know, no fingerprints. There are obviously you can see that it is really detailed, that the hands are really, really detailed, but it's not meant to represent a particular person. I remember, again, I think Hillary even mentioned this, that someone said, well, do they look too masculine? Do they look, that there was some conversation about that. And people said, no, well, they look like my grandmothers, or they look like, that it's really not about one person. It's just meant to represent labor and gestures of care. Um, yeah.
The every hand.
I was going to add the lack of fingerprints actually helps.
Yeah.
But the detail on the hands, you could tell these were hands that did some things.
Yeah.
And you feel that comfort, you feel that care, you feel that gesture of labor and work. And one of the things that impressed me in seeing is like, and this is where community came in. Those nails look too manicured.
Yeah.
We need jagged nails. Where's those nail beds? Like they're asking questions like, where's the wrinkles on the hands? Those are the type of questions we got in there too. And I think that also embodies what they're thinking about the people in the long-term generations of people who worked here and what those hands look like and how they're seeing the people they know without identifying one single person. But they said that really represents who they are and acknowledges what they did. And that, so for me, I'm glad it's not one single person. So we don't have to have, well, it's my hands over this hands. It's anyone's hands that can be in there. So not having the fingerprints matter.
We're in some interesting times, and there are many needs in the West Davidson community. So, Cynthia, can you answer how this project was funded?
Well, the project was funded from sources of funds that probably would not necessarily be inclined or maybe inclined, but also can fund other things. But the money for this particular installation and art is not cannibalizing scholarships. It's not, making it so that we can't go and do research into Beaver Dam or other sorts of things. The money comes from a source of people that really care about this project and this message and this future. And so I don't think, sometimes people think, well, why did you choose this? It's not what I would have chosen. And that's okay. The people who did choose this and wanted to fund this particular project have a big long-term vision in mind as to the other things that it's not just a sculpture, it's not just a place, it's research, it's attention, it's all sorts of other things that come with it. It's thinking about what we're supposed to do going forward to bring people into the Davidson community that in the past have not been welcomed in as they should be appropriately be. And I think that that's a different source of money that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. It was all privately funded. And Leah, do you have the number of how many people contributed? I think it's over.
I know at one time it was over 80 something
Yeah.
people that had contributed, and there were folks from multiple decades of Davidson class years.
Yeah. While I've got you, Leah, what does this project say about Davidson? And what do you want the project to say about this community?
I mean, I think that right now, in this kind of moment, I think it demonstrates a real commitment. I think a lot of other institutions have felt like they need to back down from this work, and I'm really proud that we have not. And not just that we're not backing down from this, but we're actually expanding the scope of the project, that we are now pushing into Oak and thinking about an exhibition that can accompany this to really help provide the history. So that feels really great that we are not backing down. In terms of like the community, I mean, I hope that the community embraces it. Um, and I hope that, I don't, Virgil, I often think about when you talk about your relationship to the college, that there was a time where you sort of pushed Davidson away a bit, and that you've really come back. And obviously, in a really big way, you've served the college in many ways because you've seen some of the changes that have been made. And I hope that that's how the community engages, right? That we cannot change the past, but we can try to shape the future.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping it's like a beginning of some trust building.
And I would add to that with the work's not done with this memorial. The classes will continue, the research will continue, the renovation of Oak into like an exhibit space to accompany that. That's ongoing. The work is ongoing. We're not patting ourselves on the back and saying we have done everything. We've established a trust for how we can build a better future, recognizing where we were before. And I think that invitation and welcome and how we are starting to build that trust buildings moving forward in very interesting ways, but the work is going to continue even after the dedication of this memorial. And we're still going to learn more of our past. We're still going to have here, and this is that visual representation to get people to think about how can we learn more? How can we build more? And what does our future look like when we acknowledge this past we did not acknowledge previously?
Two more questions, and then we will go to the audience questions. The first of this both of these for all of us. How does this project fit into the broader discussion of understanding the impact of slavery on today's race relations? Who wants to go first?
I can add.
Go ahead.
We're not shying away from it. We
Yeah.
are a campus that was established in the antebellum period. It's in our very fabric of our institution from our trustees forward. One of the things I think is interesting with this memorial, we go beyond 1865 and we look at the people who labored after that period too. And we're not stopping like, oh, slavery, and then that's it. We are talking about the long-term labor. And that means we are talking about generations of people who can trace from slavery to forward into the 20th century. And that's not distant history for some people. That is only that's 2-3 generations, depending on who you're talking about. And the fact that the college is leaning into that past as something to learn from and to think about how it fits in the mission is something that I think we need to have bold leadership in doing this. And this project represents that ongoing hard work, but also the leadership in doing and recognizing our history truthfully and honestly moving forward.
It might be about labor of the past, but it's also about builders of the future. And um, I think that it's a sufficiently large and ambitious effort that we've embarked upon. I don't know how successful it'll be. As Leah said, public art can inspire all sorts of conversation and feelings, and it's not always well received. But I think that you can't unring a bell, despite what some people think about what you can say about history and about work and about people. And it's moving forward, and it can't be undone in a way that I think is really important. And it makes way for a better future that we can all build together.
Do you want to add anything there?
I don't think I need to add much to that. I agree. I mean, I think it's just this truth feels critical
Yeah.
right
For me, it kind of reminds me of my own experiences at Davidson that first of all, we have to acknowledge that everybody's experience wasn't the same, right? So not everyone shared the opportunities back then, or certainly not now either. But as well, there is something good that can come from difficult situations. We have to acknowledge that it was a painful time, and the work is not yet finished, but there is something positive and beautiful that can happen when you overcome the obstacles that may have been put in your path. And I think this kind of conversation needs to happen more often, and people need to be comfortable with their discomfort, comfortable being uncomfortable with because it's not a pleasant uh, discussion, but it is an important one. Last question, and then we'll flip to the audience questions, and that is, was this what you expected it to look like when we got started?
I guess I'll start.
Mhm.
No, I didn't know what was going to come at us at all. We had diverse people in there, but I will say this, when I saw the design, I'm like, okay, this captures our history. When I went to the foundry, I cried because I'm like, this feels like what we were moving towards because we were thoughtful about our what we were looking for, how we selected this. It was not a 1 year process, it was a multi-year process. And I felt like it encapsulated all the work and it felt Davidson. And it felt important to be there, that I was incredibly emotional at the site and I was holding back the tears. And then when I got to my hotel room, I was like, I can't believe I've seen this and this is what transpired. But at the beginning, I'm like, I don't know what's going to be. I know it'll be Davidson. And now I see it as like it truly feels like a Davidson thing that fits on our campus and it's so us. It represents our values. And I could never have envisioned it without going through this journey.
Leah, what
Oh,
did you
I
think?
was looking at Cintra. She looked like she was ready to.
I was going to say that I haven't had the pleasure of seeing these in person yet, and I can't wait till it's actually installed, and that I can. But I can tell you, being on the committee, that what I wanted in my head this project to be was not literal hands. I didn't see this way at all. I really had a much more whether it was because of our discussion of memorials and anti-memorials of Nazi Germany and other sorts of places, like the things I was thinking in my head were like a abstract experience and something that was much more, it was emotional, but it was intellectual. And I think that that's what I am drawn to in general. But now that this has come together and the way that I see it, and even just the aerial view, there's something about it that I'm really happy about what it's becoming and what it has become in this process. That isn't my vision, but I think it is our vision, and I'm with it now. But this was not my initial feeling of where we were going to go. And so I'm surprised by how different it is and how pleased with it I hope to be, or I think that I will be.
Yeah, I think we did so much planning. Like we built this list of characteristics and we had all these ideas of what would be important. And so I think we understood that those characteristics would be manifested in some way. Like, for example, the idea that it needed to be a place for intimate moments, but it also needed to be a place where you could have a really large gathering. We knew that that would happen. We just didn't know exactly how. And I like that we just let the process unfold. Even in the RFQ, we did not say it had to be an artist or an architect or a landscape designer or a team of those things. Anyone could apply. Um, it did seem like the best applications came from people that, right, had those different experiences, different expertise coming together. But I think like as the curator, I hoped that there would be art, but I didn't know that there would be. And I think some of the projects, like Central, like you said, I was drawn to some things that were really conceptual. Um, I think what is making this really unique and feels so Davidson is like we really have shaped our campus with public art. Um, and this feels different than these other projects on other campuses that are much more architectural. This is both. It's kind of like the best of both worlds, I think, that it has a sculpture at the center, but then it's part of this larger commemorative site. So no, I didn't expect it, but I also am really excited about it.
Yeah, this was a nice surprise for me as well. I think from our original um, reviews of other commemoration sites, the two that stood out to me was the National Memorial for Peace at Montgomery, and then the University of Virginia's site. But those were more esoteric. They were definitely not figurative. Well, they were figurative, but they were just sort of slabs, but they told an interesting story, and I was kind of envisioning something like that. This seems more humanistic, seems more like a real person, real people, and it has more meaning than than I had anticipated. So yeah, quite different than what I expected, but a, a, a pleasant surprise. Got another question from the audience, and this is for Dr. Green. Um, would you speak to where this puts Davidson relative to other colleges and universities? Is this unique in its scope? I just mentioned University of Virginia, but you can speak to others.
One of the things I will say this, there is no other memorial like this anywhere on colleges and universities. We are unique, but we also, like the other schools, spoke to their archives, spoke to their vision and values. This also is really reflective of we're not copying other places. We're doing something that's organic in us, reflective of our archives, reflective of where we are. And I think in the end, we are a model because we're also a small liberal arts college. We're not the big art, we're not UVA, we're not the big schools with all the money doing this thing. We create something that is unique, it fits our archives, it fits our values. And other people are going to be learning from us. And I am pleasantly surprised at how many people are asking me about the process. What does this mean to engage actual community members in the process? Not just invite them when you need them, but really bring them through. What does it mean to bring in alumni trustees? What was your RFP process? People want to know because what we did is so special and how we did it in following the Davidson way. Other people are now trying to learn what we did to then copy us. So instead of copying others, we are being followed by people who want to know more about what we did. And that's exciting. And it's been important for the team in working with Virgil and working with Cintra and Leah and everyone else on here. We really thought about the values. We really thought about what we wanted and we were methodical and we thought about it. And that thought process really has shown out and it's created something special and unique that is truly us. And it's going to be one of those model institutions that people are going to be trying to write about and learn about what we did.
Um, Question for Leah, but others can chime in too. Given that the art can be contentious sometimes, has there been any pushback from members of the community, from the Davidson community, particularly West Davidson? And if so, what it may have been those objections?
Well, I think one was what we mentioned about the patina. There was some real concern about that. I think that Cintra mentioned this a little bit when she talked about the private funding. There are needs in the community, right? And so I think it's about reminding folks that it is yes, and it's this and I can't, I don't know what's going to happen with art, right? Like every artwork has, people will love it and people will hate it. And sometimes the ones that are the most disliked are the ones that become the models. I think about the Vietnam Memorial Wall, right? Like that was sort of a disliked memorial when it opened, and now it has become a model for how we think about memorials. Um, but I think that we'll just have to see. For the most part, I think you were at the most recent community engagement, Virgil, so you probably know the most about how people feel right now that they're able to see, it's different to see something as a rendering as opposed to when it's really life size or larger than life.
Mm.
We'll see. We'll have to see what happens. I will say, I cannot say what people will feel or think, but I do hope that when your ancestors are represented and you stand in the space, I hope that
Mhm.
that you'll feel acknowledged and represented, and that will be meaningful. And I think that for people who this is not their history, I hope that they'll learn something, have some sort of, I think Sintra said it too, like an academic and an emotional moment. It was emotional to be in the piece at the Foundry. So, and that was in a big messy, Foundry space. So I'm hoping that at site it will be more impactful.
The only pushback I've heard, I was at a community meeting a couple of weeks ago, week and a half, and it was that overwhelmingly people were very supportive of the process and were very supportive of, in fact, very supportive of President Hicks for continuing to do the work of President Quillen. The one person who had a concern was that they didn't get to be a part of the jury, right? It wasn't that the community wasn't involved. Like, well, I wasn't picked. Like, okay. But aside from that, people were generally very supportive of the institution. They want more partnership. They want more engagement with the college, which is understandable. But for the commemoration itself, the support has just been overwhelming. Another question. Um, how were the direct descendants of slaves who worked to build the campus involved in the discussions? And that may have been answered by the question I just shared. Uh, the direct descendants were involved to the extent that we could engage the broader community. We didn't go to specific individuals and ask committee members, individuals from the community, to be on the jury, other than one other person. But descendants weren't specifically called out to be a part of the committee. But
And I was going to say, on top of that, they reached out to us. I know I was in contact with several communities who are not in North Carolina who have communicated in, and one of the things that they're looking at, they're like, oh, you're acknowledging it. They like the process. They participate, some participate on Zoom, but some can't because this is not local for them. But for them, they're actually feeling that the design is respectful of that history. They also recognize they're one of many's in there. And so we have people who are from enslaved who are connected to the chambers, some are connected to our first presidents, and as well as those who are currently in West Davidson, Cornelius, Moore, and North Mac directly. So we did get that both in person and some of these things, but also emails directly to us or archives about this process.
Um, and Citra, maybe you can lean into this one. Has there been any pushback from the broader Davidson community outside of West Davidson, maybe the alumni or students or staff that you can recall or have heard of?
I haven't seen or heard of anybody having any problem with this project or thinking. I mean, I'm sure that there are people that have their preferences for what, if they were to spend donors' money, what they would spend it on. But nobody has said that's a waste of money, that's a waste of time, it's a waste of effort in any conversations that I've been part of. But then again, they might not say it to me. So,
Right.
and if they did, I would listen, but then I would probably nobody really wants to argue with me. So, well, no, I haven't experienced any friction about it. I think that people are really interested in it. They're very excited about it, and I think that for alumni coming back to campus, for example, they're ready for it to be here and they want to see it.
Yeah, I've likewise haven't heard any pushback from alums or from students or faculty or staff or about the commemoration itself, right? Other than the young lady who wanted to be a part of the process. Question for you, Leah. How's the project going to be lit at night?
Yeah, so we've actually had some great meetings with lighting designers who Perkins and Will have pulled in, and I wish I had some renderings of it, and hopefully I can add those to the website soon, but it will be very well lit at night through ground lighting that will be around the hands on the kind of patio or paver surface. So there's a lot of lighting there. And then there's lights that are also on the benches, which if you noticed from the design, the benches kind of radiate out quite a distance. I think there's 13 or 14 benches now. You can see they're all the way almost to the path by Phi and U also. And so those are also lit. It's going to be great. I'm sorry that that rendering doesn't have the ground lighting.
Yeah. The Oak Row exhibit space, will the interior plaster work in the south portion be preserved? It's well over 100 years old, I understand.
Yes, it is because it's a historic building. We are going through all the levels of preservation. So one of the things in there, the brick walls will be preserved, the steps coming in, a new entrance coming in that will not destroy the building. We are working through that process. One of the things I like about there, you will see the exposed brick, but you'll also see other things that are in the middle because these are also spaces that have been used. They're used as offices, they're used as storage, so they have the electrical, everything else. They just don't have bathrooms. So it will still be preserved in that way. But one of the things that is also part of the process is the material culture of that building will also be part of it. So it'll be a lot of it digital with touchscreens and other things. So current modern design with some of the artifacts and archival images of the people who worked in there as well, with a recording booth area in the back for those who are descendants who want to have their voices recorded into our archives to add later on for their perspective. But because it is a historic site and building, it's going through all the levels of state, county, and national, because it's also on the national level as well. So we will make sure that that building will maintain its character with minor modifications on the exterior.
A question that came up earlier that I didn't pose, but now may be an appropriate time when we're talking about building and preservation. The question is, will the site be difficult or dangerous for children to climb on?
I don't think so. I mean, we've talked about that a bit, but it's pretty smooth surface. There's nothing really jagged or anything like that. So we're hoping it's fine. And one of the things that comes with having sculpture, outdoor works on campus is maintenance and conservation. And so, we talked a lot about the patina and how we maintain that. The artist was like, oh, it'll just wear and it'll be really nice where people sit on it and touch it. It's going to get all shiny. I'm like, no, 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 no. We have to maintain it. Like we're going to maintain it to exactly how it was when it's here. That's our job as the curator and to preserve the work. So I think there will be a lot of touching, I think, and we'll just work towards that. But we're not imagining it to be dangerous.
The fingers, they don't seem climbable exactly. Is that, I mean, I haven't seen it. Okay. Like it's not something that people are going to be, feel like they want to climb to the top.
I don't think so. I think that people might lean or sit, but I think it's not sharp or anything like that.
I'm thinking the leaning, the touching, the little things. People like, oh, I want to rest my hand on. I saw the artist rest his hand on it, so I'm like, and just lean again. So I see that kind of wear, on there, but it's smooth and different things. And I'm thinking about the other public art that was more natural stuff. I saw kids all over it. Like I think it's like all the other art we have on our campus. And that wasn't as dangerous as I would think it is, but since the children are fine. We're
We're very respectful, like
yes.
as you would expect with Davidson, we even loan works to students for their residence halls and we never have any damage. So it won't be Davidson students that damage it. They'll embrace it.
A couple more questions before we close out. Is there a written history of this past at Davidson College that could be put in a link in the newsletter or on our website somewhere that we could capture? And Judith, you might be able to come back and help us with that if we could share information, Judith or Leah.
Yeah, there's some great links that we shared with all of the teams and we've shared with exhibit designers, and those are all from our amazing archivists and library staff. So I'm sure that those can be kind of gathered and shared in one place.
Yeah, I teach this material all the time, and a lot of it's digitized and different things. My students in my race and campus history slavery class right now are using it. Those are links that are available that have been shared more broadly. And then there's a couple of histories of Davidson that gives you the overarching thing. It doesn't always give you the African American experience, but they give you really good histories. Mary Beatty's book on the history of Davidson College, Jan Blodgett's collaborative piece on Davidson itself. And then another memorial piece, David played a harper, Ralph Johnson, who's his uncle and family members worked on our campus. When he talks about Uncle Toby, that is Otho Toby, who's in our 1895 picture. That's his uncle. So he talks about him on another way. So you can get what does the campus look like from a perspective of a community member who had a business on downtown. But those histories are really good. And then links to the other stuff that we've shared would be great to add.
Okay, one last question, and then I'm going to ask Judith to close us out. And that is there an explicit meaning to the larger design, the circle, the ripples, the way that the benches were designed and laid out?
Anybody remember? And I think that the architects and the artists were thinking about, this kind of like ongoing history and these like, this kind of ring of history, and the ripples that it has, right? That it's had on generations of people. And there's a negative to that in terms of the past, but we're hoping that we're kind of creating this better future.
I think it was also intentional to have spaces that were further away for people who wanted to kind of keep a bit of a distance, to be engaged, but not too close. And then others who might want to be very intimately connected to the piece and feel a lot more comfortable with um, all the meanings associated with the hands. Um, and we also wanted to make sure that or at least the design was created to make the piece accessible from multiple directions. And so there are sidewalks, there are walkways. It is designed to be a sort of a concentric place and to bring people in from all directions. So no matter where you are on your journey towards getting comfortable with the history of the United States and our relationship with history and with slavery, there's a path for you to get there.